Hello and welcome back to Wake and Jake with myself, BBD, and Wake and Jake legend, Foolish Bailey. It's true, man. You know, the numbers don't lie and the hips don't lie. How are you doing, Bailey?
Good. I'm ready to talk about some players with good metrics, just like I hopefully have good metrics on your YouTube page.
I mean, it's I literally had my sales team yell at me one time because they're like, do this more. And I was like, well, he does his own thing. He's a busy guy. He's making top 50 lists. He's making his videos. And I want to dive into the top 50. And, dude, I guess we were just talking about it and it's hot in the streets. And people want to hear from you. Where are you with the WBC? Because everyone had that fake dramatic week of it doesn't matter or it does matter. Right. The answer's definitely just like in the middle, and that's okay. But I guess, have you been enjoying it more or less than you expected?
I'm gonna say more than I expected.
Okay.
I wish the people that enjoyed it wouldn't let the people who don't enjoy it occupy so much of their headspace. Like if the first thought when you witnessed that game last night, which was, I thought, like just a classic, like one of the best games I'd seen in a hot minute, if the first thing that comes to your mind is like something a Barstool blogger said last week, like you need to lay off the internet for a little bit.
Yeah, and we've you know, some of the kids on the internet, you know, if you engage with that properly, you get your likes and your interactions, and it just became the cesspool that Twitter can turn into. But yeah, I mean, after last night's game, Mexico, Japan, that's as good as it gets. It felt, I was gonna tweet this, but I didn't know if it was like rude, but it felt like a Little League championship game brought to life.
Sure.
Is that weird to say? No, right? Like, it's just like
I think just in terms of like the spirit, the players on both sides, you know, like Randy when he robbed the home run, or the, you know, the celebration after the Murakami walk-off. Like, yeah, it was like that. You know, it didn't feel like they were millionaires.
Right. They weren't playing for a paycheck. They were playing for like pride. That's a great way to put it. All right, Bailey, you came out with your Foolish 50, as I like to call it. And how many years have you done this now?
I think it's the third year I've done it.
Third year. I guess what's going into the list? What has changed in your head from year 1 to year 3? Because I was kind of calculating our relationship a little bit, and I was wondering where the line is. People view me as a pretty silly guy that has some baseball information. I think people view you as a baseball guy, a guy that has baseball information who's also a pretty silly guy. I was wondering where the percentages landed there. I guess going into the 50 this year, what's changed in your headspace from year 1 to year now?
I think I've gotten a little bit better at addressing sort of the shortcomings in certain analytics. So, you know, the first iteration of the list, one stat I would have looked at a ton, especially coming off the 2020 season, by the way, so that was a unique challenge in itself, would be like a stat like StatCast xWOBA or something like that. I go, okay, this guy has a really high xWOBA. It's red on his page. That means he hits the ball hard and he doesn't strike out too much. And then I'd probably rank him like really high. Now I know a little bit better, and now I understand. I think a really good example of this is someone like number 5 there, Nolan Arenado. His StatCast xWOBA, if you go on his page, it's good. It's not great, you know, but he's coming off a season where he was like 154 OPS plus, which means he's about 50% better than the league average hitter. And the reason he can outperform that is because he can pull a fly ball like nobody else, like on command. And he's going to hit these home runs that StatCast doesn't think are no doubters, but he's going to hit them right down the line. And they're going to go, you know, potentially like second deck and Bush. You know, and so, you know, I think I've realized sort of the shortcomings. As far as I was always feeling pretty good about how I evaluated pitchers, because there's a bevy of, you know, advanced pitcher statistics that I understand pretty well, whether they be fielding independent pitching, which looks at the 3 true outcomes, strikeouts, walks, home runs, or something more. But this year, I think with the batters, I really focused on some of their like swing metrics and swing decisions. How often are you swinging at pitches inside the zone? How often are you chasing outside the zone? So those were definitely some new developments. I think especially on the hitting side, I really refined what I do.
Yeah, and I'll kind of back our way down the list a little bit, because it's an impossible exercise. Like you will never put down 50 names and then the next year will pop up and you just say, well, print it again. Like
Yeah, exactly.
We nailed it. And man, I'm coming out this week with my top 10 in the worst list this week, which, I do it more so as a fun baseball exercise. I put a little bit of information in there. I got silly on a couple of them because some positions were brutal. Like I think for the top 10 second baseman, I think I put 14 guys. Just because at a certain point you're, it's corny and I've been saying it too much lately, so I'm going to say it again and hopefully start phasing it out. But it's ice cream flavors, man. It's like, what do you like? Picking between Gleyber Torres and player X or McNeil.
Right.
Like you just, one guy is a better contact hitter, one guy's a better power hitter, one's got better speed, one's got better defense. So it's, in a way, you get to a certain level where trying to decide who's a better baseball player between, say, at 8 and 7, you have Yordan Alvarez and Jose Ramirez.
Could be more different.
Yeah, I mean, you've got one of the sneakiest 5-tool players ever in Jose Ramirez, and you might have, for years I said the best young hitter is Juan Soto, and now I don't know, is Yordan young? Is he going to casually one dot like this year? Probably. So
yeah.
But let's go to the top of the list, and pitchers is also crazy tricky for me, and I'm interested that you said you're feeling better with it than advanced metrics than ever. But at the back end of your list, you start with Justin Verlander. Is any of that for the Kate Upton click? Be honest.
For the Kate Upton click, everything I do is for the Kate Upton click. Okay. Even if I'm not talking about Justin Verlander, it's for the Kate Upton click.
That's your motto. That's the new Twitter bio.
Yeah.
I guess coming down from there, because you don't have to explain Verlander. A guy I've been struggling with, and you laid it out very nicely because of his injury from last year. Luis Robert. And is it Robert? I thought it was Robert, and now everyone's saying Robert again, right?
There's been a lot of discussion about that. I feel like he says it more like Robert or something like that. But
you feel like it's like Robert, just no T.
Yeah, he's kind of like, yeah, here they call me Luis Robert. So
for him, because he was supposed to be Cuban Mike Trout, and maybe he is.
Right.
Like I have no idea.
Still could be.
He has a couple years on his baseball reference that amaze you, and then a couple years that are like, and there's some injury risk. So I think him and George Springer back to back are very interesting, because George Springer has a couple of those years that you're like, wait, if he played 162, I think he would have broke the home run record.
Right.
Like when you're coming up to that first decision, 49 and 48, Springer and Robert, what goes into that?
Yeah, so this year, I think I paid a lot more attention to players who were injured and played through injury. I think I took that into account because I found, for most other people that would make these types of lists, if you were injured and played through injury and then you performed badly because of that injury, that was actually worse for your stock than if you just didn't play.
Right.
And so I kind of wanted to give these guys, I call this usually at the back end of the 40s, I call this like a benefit of the doubt type ranking. Robert, he'd had illness and he had blurry vision and then like his wrist. And I feel like the White Sox didn't necessarily manage it all that well. And then if you go back to his, 2021 season, I called it superstar in a small sample, and that's exactly what it was. So, when you have that ceiling where he could be, a legit MVP candidate, if everything goes right, yeah, you want him on the list. And then Springer, he's just so good. And I think the move to right field is actually going to be good for him overall. Like I like him in that Blue Jays outfield with someone else in center, like a Varsho or a Kiermaier or someone like that. So, but it's a similar situation. He was also beat up all year and played through it and actually had a really good season when he did play.
Yeah, man. And center field, it still doesn't get fully appreciated enough. And I'm 33 now. I still don't fully appreciate it, but I've laughed 3 times this offseason because AJ Pollock played like a buck 30 games in center last year, and he should not be doing that. So I also, as you get a little older, and I guess I'm biased towards Connecticut outfielders as well, kick into the corners can be real nice for you. And dude, when Springer's locked in, man, he's so good. It's this weird career where he was slightly overshadowed in Houston by their big guys, and then he goes to Toronto. That I mean, his best years, it always blows me away a little bit. I got two young guys that I want to jump to next as you go down the list. Wander Franco, your guy, and Spencer Strider, who I have no clue what to do with. Because if he's the guy from last year, I mean, he probably has like a top 10 argument. Like, I don't know. And then Franco, you some half-jokingly said the same. Like, this guy is a young shortstop, Prince, who was promised, got the bag. Again, a funky injury-laden year last year. So, like, again, putting them in the low 40s, where's your thought process there?
Yeah, I think you wanna find rankings that balance for their floor versus their ceiling, and the range of outcomes for those two in particular just seems extremely wide, right? Like Spencer Strider, if you want to go and extrapolate his whatever 20 or so starts across 30 starts, then yeah, you're right. You're talking about maybe the best pitcher in baseball. Right. I don't know if that's going to happen when you add that extra volume, but that's the, the possibility. And then Wander Franco, I don't think I need to explain like just how good he can be. This was most hyped prospect we've seen since probably at least Harper, But yeah, so I think just as far as ranking those guys, it's just a combination. You try to find somewhere in between the floor and the ceiling. And in Franco's case, I think the floor is probably higher than people give him credit for. He's played about 150 career games. He's already like, if you care about wins above replacement, like a 5-4 player, which would already be like a top 50 player if it was just one season instead of split across two. And then Strider, I mean, this guy, he's striking out like 37% of the batters he faced last year. Like he's breaking, all the rookie strikeout records. So it's pretty incredible stuff for those two. But yeah, you could definitely argue them 20 spots higher or 20 spots lower.
And I want to take a baby step back because I did I'll give a shout out to Trevor M for the guy that he lists your guys that fell off the Foolish 50 from last year. Which I thought that's a fun game because number 50 is tough. Logan Webb. Me and BBD just did the top 5 pitchers, 26 and younger, because there was just kind of a graduating class that went to 27 that was like, I'm blanking on some of the names, but it was just like, I think Sandy made the jump. I think there was just a
like
group.
Nola's not young anymore.
There's just
there's
a new wave of young pitchers from I feel like the lexicon. Webb, technically still there and technically had another great year. He's he was tough for me to quantify because I was like, yes, he's one of the best young pitchers in baseball, but I think we landed on comparing him and Christian Javier, and I was like, I think gun to my head, I'd actually take Christian Javier, but everything Logan Webb has done, he deserves more street cred to that. So he's a difficult one. I think some of the other ones on your list that kind of fell out, you'd understand. A Rendon, Brandon Crawford, Muncy had a tough year. I guess Bieber's a unique one, although that's I don't know if that's more metric laden. And then I thought Brian Reynolds was interesting because that's a tough one. And I guess the other name I want to add to the losers list, if we'll call it that, your words, not mine, for these elite athletes. Dansby? Does Dansby have any ground to stand on? Like, I feel like he does and he doesn't.
For me right now, I don't think he quite does. Like, if I'm talking about like shortstops who didn't make the list, like I would still put someone like a Willy Adames ahead of him. And so I think when you reach a point where you have players who play your position that are not on the list, then that means you weren't like particularly close to making the list. I like Dansby. I think, if he goes out next year and he's honestly, if he has a season like Nico Horner just had for the Cubs last year, and all of a sudden they have two Nico Horners like playing next to each other, like that's a pretty good outcome for them with his contract and everything. But I just don't know if it's tough when so much of your value is derived from single season defensive metrics. His WAR was really high, but that's one season of StatCast outs above average where he, I think, led the league. So it's tough to say how much you can actually replicate that year to year.
That's fair. And that's where I was interested with the shortstops, Bogarts and Seager, because they are two guys, as you mentioned in your video. I mean, defensive reputation-wise, I think if you just talk to baseball field, they're not regarded as the highest, defensive shortstops. But last year they graded out decently. And then, Bogarts is Xander Bogarts, and he just kind of hits, and he will hit. Seager, at slow start, most homers for the shortstop, and projecting for this year, which again is the tricky part of this exercise, you'd assume it even ticks up, which if he ticks up from last year, you're talking about a 40-homer shortstop that, even if his defense is, I was going to say mid, but I got to stop. If Seager's defense is mid, you take that from the shortstop position, and yeah, you're basically a top 25 player. But I don't know. Those guys have become really tough for me, and maybe I need to respect their defense a little more, but I guess 1 year of it is where I'm also hesitant, and that's where, going back to the shortstop position, I struggle putting them in the boiler with Dansby, because if he replicates last year,
right, I
think Dansby was better than those guys last year.
Yeah, I think you definitely make that argument, but going forward, if I had to pick one of those, like defensively, I think Xander passes the eye test better than Seager. Like, just when I watch him play, I'm like, oh, he's pretty good out there. But I think Seager's about to go just totally ballistic at the plate next season. Like, he's a guy that I almost wish I could rank higher. His batting average on balls in play last year was like 60 points lower than his career norm, and when you're a hitter, you have these types of profiles and you're expected to sort of be consistent with them. So when you have a fluctuation like that, the shift not being a thing for him is going to be huge. He was just crushing the baseball his first year with Texas. So, I mean, honestly, like, if Seager goes out and wins MVP, I won't even be that surprised. Like, I think really highly of him. I ranked him at 27 because I was about as high as I could go without it seeming like I was going crazy,
I know. And
it's hard to rank him ahead of Bregman or Realmuto or Lindor or Nola after the seasons those guys had.
And that's, I want to do a little bit of third base here, because Bregman, I was having some interesting conversations with myself, because I love his defense. If there's ever a moment, I'm never going to doubt him. I think the stat page the last 3 years is slightly lackluster. He puts it together for a full season last year. I mean, it's a really nice season, but where I'm leading with this, Bailey, and it's a question I've asked myself multiple times, when we do Talkin Baseball, I'll find myself, I was saying it too much. I was saying, like, this guy's underrated. You got to talk about this guy. And if you say that about everyone, it just loses all effect. So I've pulled back on it. There's a guy who for the past 2 years has been elite, top 7 MVP the last 2 seasons. He's a young player getting better. I think Austin Riley is my most underrated player in baseball. For some reason, we don't give him the respect of a player that was 25 and 26 and got better, or 24 and 25, got better, plays every game, and has, like, improved. I don't know. It's a weird thing for me that he doesn't, I don't know if it's the company he's surrounded by or whatever, but he deserves to be, I think he's underrated somehow.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. He and Devers are so similar. They're both approximately the same age. They, are great offensive third basemen who have question marks defensively. And Devers, definitely gets this superstar treatment. And it's not like Riley plays for like a small market team or isn't on like a winning team or anything like that. So yeah, I think you bring up an interesting point there. And I was kind of making that statement, just having them really close to each other at 31 and 29, respectively. I was saying, like, hey, these guys are really similar players overall.
And I wonder, I mean, BBD, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I guess is it being a too close to the situation thing, but I think if you asked a lot of baseball fans, if you said for one game or one series you get Devers or Riley, I'd probably pick Devers, but I think the stats slightly point to Riley in the past 2 seasons overall, but is it Devers like flash, or is he just cool? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Devers is cool. Remember when Devers was like 13 years old and he hit that home run? Like it was like an Aroldis Chapman, like 103-mile-per-hour fastball.
We're reminded of it every day because of goddamn Joe's McFly in the office. Whenever his MasterCard commercial pops up, it's like, Joe's is the worst. Joe's will be like, oh, yeah, they're doing another thing with that this year. And you're like, what? Joe's, that's a MasterCard commercial. You're getting paid for this, right? Yeah, I think it's so funny when you put all of this on paper because, like everything I said with this exercise, that's impossible. Like seeing Adley at 33 and Real Muto at 25, knowing a little bit of how you view baseball, I think in your heart of hearts that might have been tough for you because I'd like to think if I went gun to your head, and that's twice I've used that, and I need to stop using that.
You need to stop threatening me.
If I said who has a better year, Adley Rutschman or JT Real Muto, I'd like to think a lot of your gut would say Adley, no?
Yes, no, I think that's definitely true. One thing with Real Muto for me is it's the pop time versus the run game this year. Like if they're stealing more bags, he is the ultimate counter to that because he's just going to shut it down, you know? So that's one thing I definitely took into consideration. The other is Adley, some of his like average exit velocity stuff isn't great yet. It'll probably, get there this year, but something like his barrel rate, it's not quite to that like Real Muto level. And then Real Muto even they're both great athletes, don't get me wrong, but like Real Muto is just a freak back there.
I've had a weird sheepish grin whenever I think about his last year. Cause man, that's awesome. Like last year was kind of the big, like, is it leaving him? Like did catching catch up to him? And his second half last year, he goes nuts, and the stolen bases for himself is still like, how, man? Like, how are you this much of a freak show while just looking like kind of a normal hot guy from Oklahoma?
One stat I dropped in the video is that last year he was successful, like as a base runner, on 96% of his stolen bases, and then base runners against him were successful 56% of the time.
It's ridiculous.
So for him, it's automatic, and against him, it's a 50-50 proposition.
God, that's incredible. As we head towards the meat of the list, and I think it's funny because, as I was thinking about this normal exercise, getting to the top 10, but like I said, I'm not going to make you describe the difference between Soto and Judge this year. Like I think the people kind of get that. I do think this 20 through 17, Tatis, Harper, Acuna, Julio.
That was fun.
What the hell do you do with that crew, man?
Yeah, well, I think I was like, oh my gosh, Harper and Tatis are by far the two hardest players to rank on this stupid thing because Tatis is, electric when he's right, top 5, but hasn't played Major League Baseball in a year, and it's all his fault. And then Bryce was just sort of, I want to give this guy his flowers. When he's healthy, he's a top 10, but he's only going to play half the season, and this list is for 2023. If I was, rating it off 2023 value alone, I'm not sure he'd be even on the list. I don't think he's, necessarily providing enough value in half a season compared to Bo Bichette in the full season or something like that. But yeah, that was tough. And then Acuna, I feel pretty good about Acuna this year. I think MLB Network probably had him ranked a little bit lower, but some of his batted ball data on StatCast still looks really good. And I just think, man, like the difference between coming fresh off ACL tear recovery and then a year removed from it, like he's just going to be so much more confident in terms of his defense and even like his base running. And then, Julio coming in at 17, which, believe it or not, MLB Network had him at 16. So usually I'm the one who's going to be like kind of ageist, like, oh, let me pump up this, young guy. Like, no, MLB Network's like right there with me in terms of their list.
My how do I phrase this? My kind of value bets for MVP this year, I think are Acuna and Vladdy. I think Vladdy bounces back. I think we'll talk about, I think young Vladdy has to kind of learn by doing a little bit. And I think he had that year where he lost all the weight and he put in the work, and then he he went nuts. And then I think last year he kind of came down just a little bit, and I think all those Blue Jays might have kind of their awakening year. And if not this year, then kind of when? Like, we're kind of can't do the dance anymore, A lot of you guys have been in the show for 3-4 years now. All right, this is where I want to put you in a tough spot and a good spot. Mm-hmm. If you had to give me 2 guys that you think will be off the list next year, and if you want to be ageist or injuryist or however you want to approach it.
I'm going to go with McNeil.
Okay.
At 45 there. And then I'm also going to go with I'll go Luis Robert.
Okay. And is that mostly potential injury for Robert, and McNeil just the contact, hard hit stuff? Years can fluctuate fairly easily, or what?
I think with
or you
Robert,
just hate them?
I personally hate both of them. Yes, and they know what they did.
Okay,
I just want to be very clear on that. They know what they did.
Thank you.
But as far as I think as far as Robert, I don't think it's injury, because it's like he's almost in the Buxton spot where it's like. Right. If this guy gets hurt, I'm still going to be thinking about how great he can be when he's healthy. But it's like if he just had like a healthy season and he was just like kind of good, I'd be like, all right, he's off the list. He's not quite who I thought he was. And then McNeil, like, you're kind of right. The other thing too is like I'm sure you've talked a lot this offseason about like the lefty pull hitter who's going to benefit from the shift. Right. Corey Seager, Matt Olson. Does that mean that the guy who can spray the ball anywhere actually suffers a little bit? And if that's the case, then maybe, McNeil gets a little bit of a downgrade in terms of his offensive expectations, because this guy he's got great back control. He can just, hit the ground ball to the opposite field and get a hit from it. But if the shortstop is standing where the shortstop normally is supposed to be, then maybe he misses out on a few base hits.
Right. Or maybe even to add on that would be McNeil's skill is highlighted more during the shift times where everyone else catches up,
right.
If that's what that looks like. So I guess positive spin then, if you had 2 guys that you think might be your biggest risers, either on this list or potentially coming from off the list. And my brain jumps to Wander potentially if he was healthy this year, but who are a couple guys that you're like, I think if this is 24, like, I guess Tatis could jump up to like 2, right? So
definitely,
I guess I'll kick it to you.
Well, so when I was making this list, there were 2 players that I really wanted on it, and I just sort of ran out of spots. Like, I just sort of had this come to Jesus moment where I was like, there are more than 50 top 50 players in Major League Baseball. And of course there are, because some guys are going to get hurt. I mean, a couple of guys on this list have already gotten hurt. Rodon's not going to be ready for opening day. Altuve, right. Nimmo. So the 2 guys that I really want on this list were Michael Harris II and Marcus Semien. Those were the 2 that just like, it killed me to leave them off. And so if either of those guys have big seasons next year, I won't be too surprised. Another young guy, I'm thinking like, he could I wanted to put him on the list this year, but I don't think he was quite ready yet, would be Vinny Pasquantino. I could definitely see Vinny Pasquantino jumping in to a 40, 30, even top, 20s type spot, because the underlying metrics for him are just insane. He looks like Freddie Freeman, like in terms of things he does well at the plate. As far as big risers on the list, obviously Buxton, if he's, healthy season, I think that goes without saying. Adley for sure. If you're talking about like a more established player, I would say Kyle Tucker. Tucker, he's at 30 right now, and I think that's probably a little harsh, because he's a 5-tool player. He's great at everything, and he's really just like one slight improvement away from entering into like what we would call like a top 10 discussion. So I would say obviously young guys, but I mean Kyle Tucker's young, but as far as established players who could be big risers this year, Kyle Tucker.
Yeah, sure. That 31 through 29, Devers, Tucker, Riley. I looked at that and I was like, that's I don't see those guys getting worse. So, man, where else were they looking? Michael Harris too, dude. I can't process. Similar to Austin Riley and similar to Spencer Strider, like what Strider and Harris did last year, as rookies,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can't project them getting worse. And, you know, you can't project a sophomore slump from those guys. And if those guys get better, it's
right.
They're both top 25. So yeah, it's those are good ones. Those are good ones. I guess I wanna finish with, and I said this at the start a little bit, the pitchers and just how you can really. What was your biggest one that was a differential with MLB? Was it Nola or Wheeler?
Nola was probably the biggest one, and then beyond that, Woodruff as well. Pretty big disagreements there.
Right, and I liked your Woodruff argument because he had the weird injury where he had no grip, and when he came back from that, I was a little, for some reason, Woodruff in my head is still like the. Remember when he got a hit in that playoff game?
He got a home run, I think.
Yes, and for some reason he's too buried in my head as like that guy. Like, he's a nice pitcher.
He's Daniel Camarena in your head.
Yeah, he's a step above. He's a step above Camarena. It's kind of like, honestly, like starting pitcher Archie Bradley in his prime. Like Archie Bradley has the hit,
right.
And as a reliever, he was
hit
really
the triple.
good. Yeah. So I just need to shake that loose a little bit. But like, you know, I mean, even Shane McClanahan at 35. I know you're a fan of him and his common successes.
Right.
Like how to compare him and Nola at 23, to compare him and potentially DeGrom at 9, who, like, you know, you're a 4-week injury away from being a little bit of a situation there. And with DeGrom's recent history, and I know we've done the injury thing, and injuries aside, there's not an argument with DeGrom except maybe Spencer Strider if he does what he does. That with the pitchers, I guess, and you hinted to it a little bit, do you lean on Sierra and Fipp or what's, and that's kind of where end of the day you have to go there?
Yeah, I like Sierra a lot. I think one thing I did this year was I was looking more at the pitch grading type stuff, like the Eno Saris stuff plus, or Cameron Grove pitching bot, you know, which is kind of a similar approach to this, but I was looking a lot more at that. And then I was just kind of trying to break them down by arsenal as well. So I'd look at, okay, is this a plus pitch for them? Is this like a plus pitch for them? And, you know, if a guy was, you know, able to command, you know, 3 pitches that were all, you know, above average in terms of the results, like that was something I would definitely take into account. I think that's kind of where I landed on, you know, a guy like Nola, even where he's, and the thing with Nola is his command is insane. Real Muto puts his glove down and that's exactly where the pitch is going to go, you know, and when he misses, he doesn't miss at all. And he's coming in this contract year where he could potentially be getting like paid this offseason. So I think it's kind of like the perfect storm for him as far as like having a big season. And that's why, I mean, I think I have him like the 5th highest rated pitcher on this list, which is kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, it's it was a little eye-opening for me because, again, you could go so many different ways with this list. And I guess for me, and Philly fans, turn your ears off. You gave Zach Wheeler a boost from you know, his playoff performance and you know, rightfully so. I don't know. I just, doing the fast forward to 2024, I wonder, Zach Wheeler, a guy that used to have an injury reputation that then turned into like one of the best pitching contracts ever. I wonder if there could be a potential slip there. And I know you said his velo was down, and if you try to predict injuries, you're just getting in the wrong game. But yeah, man, the pitchers list, and not to give away too much of my top 10 and the worst, but I think I named like 28 pitchers. Just it's impossible, man. Like you know, we mentioned Javier. Like what? I don't know.
Yeah, my conclusion was the difference between 5 and 15 is pretty negligible. Like it just is. You know, you just don't know what's going to happen. Like think about the guys who aren't on this list, like Javier, Max Fried, Kevin Gausman, Manoah, Julio Urias. These are good pitchers, you know.
Max Fried and Urias not being considered top 50 players feels sinful. Like,
right.
For
totally.
What they've put together consistently as young, talented pitchers. And by the way, Urias is still young. Max Fried, like 29, I think. That was a weird part of our young pitcher exercise. It was like, oh, all right. I kind of had you guys in the same pool.
The thing is, they age differently from hitters. Like you can be a young 29 as a pitcher.
Right.
I do believe that. Like some guys they really don't get it together until they're in their late 20s.
Max Fried is handsome. He's got the clean face.
Yeah, I know. He looks like he's 22.
We like him. Bailey, thank you so much. What should the people be expecting anything different from Foolish Bailey this year? Any different not to reveal any secrets or anything,
Sure.
but anything you'd like to tell the people?
Out of the Park baseball's coming out soon, and I think that's something that Foolish Bailey will take an interest in.
Okay. I'm interested. I did laugh on the way thinking about our out of the park baseball exercise that the world will never see
I'll never see it
as we tried to get creative with technology. But man, I'm as we go on this weird ride of new baseball media, I'm excited for you for this year. Any Braves takes we need?
Braves take Orlando Arcia, starting shortstop for the Atlanta Braves.
Okay.
It's not our biggest problem. Left field's our biggest problem. Orlando Arcia last year hit the ball hard. Average exit velocity over 90 miles per hour. I'm kind of with it. You could call it cope, You could call it cope. Vaughn Grissom, Braden Shoemake, maybe they figure it out in AAA and get back up, to Atlanta pretty quickly. But when I think about, what's the problem with the Atlanta Braves right now? I don't think it's shortstop. I think it's probably left field.
Man, Vaughn Grissom optioned.
Yeah.
How about that? Good for Arcia, huh?
Yeah, I think he earned it, honestly.
Good for him, man. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they... I understand your sentiment. I feel like Eddie or Marcel will figure something out. Or you know what freaked me out? One of the first transactions of this offseason, the Braves said, we need Big Sam Hilliard. And I don't know, man. When good organizations make a confident move like that,
yeah,
there's something up. So I'm not saying Sam Hilliard is the answer, but maybe it's a lot of people might be eyeing a certain left fielder on the Cubs during the trade deadline, which that would be
a certain investor.
That would be exciting for the company, and then very sad if he's available and the Yankees don't trade for him.
Yeah.
Because that changes the mood of the office a lot. I guess, and I've said last time a couple times, but any Yankee stuff, me, BBD, and Jom have been putting ourselves through the ringer of what the heck are they going to do with these kids and how does it sort out? I guess, do you have any tea leaves or expectations from the Yanks?
I don't know if my expectations are high, but I just want to make it clear I am an Oswaldo Cabrera enjoyer.
Okay.
I enjoy watching him play the game of baseball. I hope that he will get a chance to play a lot this year.
I was nervous for a while that they weren't going to give him the opportunity, but with the current state of the outfield, you gotta play that guy.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that's where it lands. And yeah, man, after when Bader got hurt and he made an incredible diving catch in center field, I said, okay, I think he is going to force their hand and make them play him because, man, that's been the most frustrating part, I'd say, of the last week or so, because you get sucked into the World Baseball Classic. We had a blitzball thing. It's spring training. It's all that. The Yankees have 3 rookies that I should be, stoked about, and right. I haven't gotten excited at all because I didn't know if they were going to play any of them.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all waiting for some sort of shoe to drop there, or, just wait for Murakami to sign in 2 years. But we'll get there when we get there. Bailey, thank you so much, man. I guess enjoy the baseball season. We'll see you at some point,
Yeah.
You got any city trips?
Ooh, I would love a New York trip. Maybe off season. Maybe like a little November,
Okay. BBD's got room.
BBD's got room, okay.
Good hugger.
True.
And you only have one bed, and it's a twin. Oh no! I guess we'll just have to share it.
And we leave a lot of space on the other side for Jesus. So.
Right? Yeah.
And that's just smart. Bailey, thank you, brother.
Hey, thank you.